we are going to go here to my buddy Josh, who I think stepped away. Josh Kitterino has stepped away from the table at Boston Harbor Encore. What's going on, Josh?
Hey, what's going on, bud? I'm actually up at Chasers.
Oh, Chasers. That's right. You said you were at Chasers. And I had told Josh that I really did have the intention of trying to play at Encore last night because Chasers was closed. But, dude, just the Christmas, the meals, and my 1-year-old, it just didn't it didn't really cooperate with me all that well. What's going on? What's the action up there on Chasers, Josh?
Today is actually very busy. They're doing some sort of high hand promotion where you go up and pull an envelope and you can get up to a $2,000 high hand. So I had to wait close to 3 hours for a seat. So that kind of sucked. And then my first orbit, I got knit rolled with top set against my bottom set.
Just now today?
Just today, yeah.
It's funny because if you guys, so there's a couple things. So we have a new feature for CLP subscribers over in the in our Discord, and Michael G and Tom helped us set this up, where we have forums because we sort of depreciated the forums off of the first version of CLP. You know, forums kind of went out of style a little bit, forum posting on poker, but now Discord has an option where you can use forums, and we've implemented them on the CLP Discord. And because we did a podcast last week about donk betting, I actually posted as my first post this hand that Josh actually fed to me from, was it Chasers or was it from Encore, Josh?
This was at Chasers as well.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about a hand here that I put up in the forums, and for UCLP subs, I'll link this part of the video to there.
This is Chasers 2-5. It's a 1K cap.
Mm-hmm.
And like we had mentioned, I mean, this hand isn't too in depth because there's not much action, but it fits into your podcast from last week, so it's probably relevant for this week.
Okay.
So this is, like I said, 2-5 1K, 8-handed. Under the gun, we're all say a 1K stack. So under the gun limps, and I'm under the gun 1 with Ace of Clubs, King X, and I raced at 25.
Ace of Clubs, King X, and you make it 25, which is probably your standard, right?
Yeah, I open 15 unless there's a limp, then I go to 25 and try to punish them a little bit.
Okay, so make it 25 at about 1,000 effective, right?
Yeah, 1K.
Okay.
The button calls, the big blind calls, and the limper calls. So it goes 4 ways. It's 100 in the pot.
So button calls, big blind calls, limper calls, and we're off to a 4-way pot of 100. I like it. Okay.
Yep. And so the board comes out pretty good for me. It's King of Clubs, 9 of Clubs, 8 of Diamonds.
King of Clubs, 9 of Clubs, 8 of Diamonds, and Hero holds Ace of Clubs. I'm going to put it up as Ace of Clubs, King of Hearts. I know it's not necessarily relevant, so just as a placeholder. Yep. So you flop top pair, but you have the Ace of Clubs. You have the stiff Ace of Clubs.
So I flop top, and I'm holding the nut blocker.
Yep. Okay.
So the big blind checks, and now the under the gun limper decides to just lead out for 65.
Now, this is interesting because you do have a guy behind you. And again, on the podcast, we talked about what does a large donk mean versus a small donk. And another sort of small stakes exploit, though, too, is the smaller the pot, the more, I would say, close to a pot size bet doesn't really mean pot size, because it's sort of smaller in absolute. And then it's the exact opposite as the pot gets larger. If someone were to bet like 500 to 1,000, that's a huge bet at this level. It doesn't represent the strength of 50%. So this one's kind of in between, because when we talked about what does a large donk usually represent into the field, 2-pair plus, some draws that people might deem to be big draws. But one of the things we talked about too is that when you hold top pair, you are blocking a lot of you're blocking some of the 2-pair possibilities, but more importantly, in this particular situation, when you hold the Ace of Clubs, someone can't have the nut flush draw. So this is kind of in between. Now, I will say, with the fact that the button is behind you, in a sort of in-between spot here, I kind of would probably do more raising than just calling, specifically for that reason, even though you have the Ace of Clubs here. What were your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it can definitely go either way. On this board texture, I mean, it's just a lot of middling cards, so people definitely have lots of draws. 8-9's represented, Jack 10, Queen Jack 7, 10, 10 queen. So I think a raise here can be in order some of the time. I just ended up flatting. Figured my hand played pretty well. I can continue across turns with clubs, and I was just going to see what happened with the guy behind me.
So would it have been any different for you if you didn't have the ace of clubs here?
Yeah, I mean, then way more draws can be represented. I don't know if I would raise still. It's one of those things where if I raise and then can get 3-bet, I think I could just fold my hand. But then on the other hand, it's like, way more draws are represented. So it's just a kind of a difficult spot. If I do raise and then get re-raised, or the guy just continues, like, what do I bet on the turn? Because any card from a queen through a 5
can be bad for you.
Can be bad, and then any club, right?
Right. I mean, the other thing too is that what I was trying to say before too, not just that you block 2 pair, but like, of the donk leads that you want to raise, you want to get value from top pair. When you have top pair yourself, there's obviously less combos of just top pair. So when we take a whole if we sort of treat this as a large donk, Josh is blocking king X. He's also blocking the fact that the guy might be leading out with a nut flush draw. There's obviously some interior combo draws that someone could have, but those are big draws. Those are like 15 out draws. Someone could bet 3-bet jam. So the composition of Josh's hand might, in this spot, make him want to just call, because his opponent might be sort of lean towards some more of those value hands because of what he holds in his hand. But okay, so you call. What does the button do?
The button calls 2.
And then the big blind folds?
And then the big blind folds. So we lose 1 player, and it's 3 ways to a turn.
So 195 series. This is like just under maybe 300 in the pot, something like that, right?
Yeah, I have it at like 295 or something.
Okay. On to the turn.
So the turn now is a pretty interesting card. It's the 7 of clubs.
So the front door now comes in, and of course you have the ace of clubs, but this button guy has called behind you too, right?
Exactly. So, straights get there. If someone had 8-7 of whatever with, 8-7 of clubs, because the 8 wasn't a club.
Yep.
You can't have that now because it's a 7 of clubs on the turn. But
King of clubs, 9 of clubs, 8 of diamonds, 7 of clubs.
So no one can have top pair with the nut flush with the flush draw, because the king of clubs is on board.
Right.
But there are still a bunch of other flush draws that are still out there.
Obviously, Jack 10 comes in here too. That's another
Jack
draw.
10 comes in,
and the button could have that. Okay, so what ends up happening now?
So the turn actually just checks around.
Okay, so UTG, who led the flop, checks. Now you are in the middle and you decide to check, and I think that is a solid play, especially with the button behind you, because like you can check call, but you don't want to get raised here, right?
Definitely not. And
especially
if the button had folded on the flop, I think I probably would have bet the turn.
Sure. That makes sense, because you can sort of manipulate the pot. You can use that kind of 1/3 sizing. You can decide whether you just want to go to showdown on improved, but now you've got the guy you've got the guy behind you, so it's much harder to play, but it gets checked through. Okay. Now we're on to the river.
So the river is this complete blank. It's offsuit 3.
All right, so 3 of hearts on the river. And does UTG check again?
He sure does.
Now the pot is 295. You have the ace of clubs. I would imagine here, when you think about the quality of flush that gets sandbagged the most, what is it usually? Like what rank of flush is slow played the most?
The nut flush.
The nut flush, which of course they can't have because you have it in your hand.
They can't have.
So it would be very bizarre to me for the UTG to lead out, then check a flush, then the guy behind you checks a smaller flush, and then the UTG checks again. I don't think either of these guys have flushes. Now the question is, does somebody have Jack 10 and they're playing scared? You still lose to the guy who might have been leading here with 2 pair, and he's just sort of checking it down, and he's not going for value because he just wants to get to showdown at the end here, the upfront guy.
Yeah, because say the guy up front leads out with 2 pair. I mean, that's a really terrible card for him on the turn, and I would expect him to check 2 pairs on the turn when 2 people call him on the flop.
Yeah, this one's kind of close because there's only so many kings in the deck, right? Now,
Right.
I think if you're up against King X here, like if somebody donked with King Queen or King Jack, let's say both guys have a king, you probably will get called by one of these guys. But I will say I don't expect the button to check through. Here's the issue that I have. Maybe occasionally the button's checking through once in a while Jack 10, although you probably shouldn't when you check in the middle. But I'm still a little bit more concerned about what that donk lead represents, and maybe you're still beat anyways, and the guy's just trying to go to showdown. It's pretty close. I love to go thin in these spots. I might go 1 to 125, but I think it's probably pretty close against two people. Obviously, if it was heads up, it would be much different.
Right. I mean, heads up, I would 100% bet. In this instance, I thought if I did bet, it was definitely going to be small, about a 1/3 size bet. When it came down to it, I ended up just checking. I'm going to realize my hand and see what happens. I mean, it's one of those spots that are just super close, and I don't think you can go wrong either way, right?
Well, I mean, and then it gets checked through, you win. It would be interesting if the button bets like something large now. I don't think you're going to see that all that much. It's interesting if the button bets and then you get a call. But what did the button do?
The button ended up checking too.
All right, so it gets checked through. So that does not necessarily mean that Josh has the best hand because, again, I think we're a little bit concerned possibly that he was beat by the UTG. I think it's close. So what are the reveals here?
So the reveal was the guy who...
The UTG guy.
Yep, he had King 9 offsuit, so he flopped top 2.
So there we go. We're right on. So UTG has King 9 off.
Yep,
so
limping under the gun.
And he just donked. Like Nate's contention from our podcast, if you consider that the large donk. And then he just sort of shut it down when the club came and Jack 10 came through.
Right.
It's interesting. You never found out what the button had, though, right?
No, the button just threw his hand away, so I never saw what he had.
Obviously,
but yeah, I mean, I wonder what can be taken from this just with his sizing. If he bet 30 on the flop, I wonder if that's more indicative of him having a draw where he bets a little bit larger, the 2/3 sizing, if that, that's more towards value.
Sure. Our contention from last week is, of course, if he bets small, it's not going to be two pair types of things. It's going to be pricing a draw. It's going to be sort of a hand that's kind of trying to find out where it's at. Now, if he had gone like 80 or 90 just by sheer sizing, that is a large donk. But this one's a little bit in between. But I think what's interesting here is you still take away that still you were beat on the flop. And then he still doesn't put in the value bet against two people. So usually, I don't know if we addressed multi-way post-flop after, a donk. But there is something to be said, which probably we didn't quite address, which is should you have a little bit higher of a frequency of raising a donk to clean up the people behind you, so to get it heads up too. And I think that that's something of note that should be considered as well. But Josh, appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
All right, bud. Take care, man.
All right.